Most women have no idea what truly awakens inside a man the moment a woman surrenders her body. Not the performance, not the choreography, not the outward motion of desire, but the ancient psychological storm that rises beneath his ribcage when feminine openness collides with masculine instinct. In that moment, something far older than both of them stretches awake, the archetypal force that Jung tried to describe yet never fully could because it belongs to the wordless realm where the unconscious speaks in urges, images, and trembling truths. A man may believe he is simply entering her body, but on the level of the psyche, she is entering him, filling the inner cathedral where his shadows hide, where his wounds are stored, where his ego pretends to be stronger than it truly is. And you can sense this, can't you? The way his silence changes. The way his breath doesn't just deepen, it reveals. When a woman opens her body to a man, the masculine psyche rarely experiences it as mere pleasure. What he feels is a confrontation with the part of himself he cannot control. Her surrender exposes his truth. It exposes his fear. It exposes his longing to be worthy of the very thing he once fantasized about, but never fully understood. Men spend their entire lives searching for acceptance without judgment, presence without performance, power without domination. And the moment a woman lets him inside her, all those silent cravings he hides under ambition, humor, or stoicism awaken like a long-starved animal suddenly fed. For a brief instant, the masculine ego is stripped bare. His armor loosens. The guardedness he carries from childhood softens. His soul steps out from behind the curtain and asks a single, trembling question. Is this real? Am I allowed to be seen? Because while the world teaches men to crave conquest, the unconscious teaches them to crave surrender. But not hers, as many women mistakenly fear. No, the masculine soul wants the chance to surrender to, her presence, to be held in the one place his ego cannot pretend, the space where his body meets hers and nothing false survives. When she lets him in, she becomes a mirror. And mirrors are dangerous things for a man who has avoided himself for decades. Look closely at his face in the moments after you open yourself to him. There is always a shift, subtle, fleeting, but revealing. Some men freeze as if overwhelmed by receiving more than they believe they deserve. Others become tender in ways they cannot express with words. Others grow quiet because they are suddenly aware of how much power she holds. Not the power to manipulate, but the power to awaken parts of him he has kept exiled. The boy who needed warmth, the young man who feared rejection, the adult who learned to survive without softness. Jung would say that intimacy is the battlefield where the anima, the feminine within him, rises from the depths and demands to be acknowledged. And whether he fights it, denies it, or embraces it, the moment she lets him enter, she confronts him with his own inner woman, the part of him that feels, yearns, breaks, and hopes. A man does not reveal this consciously. Most could never articulate it. But his unconscious speaks through instinct. The way he touches you afterward, the way he holds your hips like he's grounding himself, the way his chest presses closer than necessary as if seeking shelter. When a woman surrenders her body, the masculine psyche enters a threshold between power and vulnerability. He feels responsible, yet exposed, energized, yet undone. Her openness becomes an invitation for him to meet himself, and that is why the moments right after intimacy are often the most telling. Does he seek closeness, or do his defenses snap back like a reflex? Does he soften into your presence, or retreat into detachment? Does his breath synchronize with yours, or does he return to the performance of distance? These reactions are not about you. They are about the war inside him. Men fear the places where they feel too deeply. They fear losing control. They fear needing someone who has the power to leave. But beneath the fear lies something more profound: awe. A man in the presence of a woman who truly opens to him experiences awe. the kind that silences the mind and awakens the soul. Her surrender is not submission. It is revelation. It is the moment she tells his unconscious without words, "I trust the truth of who you are, even if you don't." And that is the one message. The masculine psyche craves more than desire, more than beauty, more than validation. But here is the truth few women ever hear. When she surrenders her body, she is not giving him power, she is giving him responsibility. And the man who feels this in his soul will rise. The man who fears it will run. The man who is not ready will try to turn the sacred into the casual. But the man who is awake, even slightly, will feel something within him bow, not to her body, but to the meaning of her openness. Because deep down, every man knows. What she gives him in that moment is something he could never take. It is something only her soul can offer. And that realization is enough to reshape him. The moment her body opens to him, the masculine psyche steps into a terrain where words become useless and instinct takes command. What unfolds inside him is not logical, not linear, not even consciously chosen. It is ancient. It is the awakening of a memory carried in the bones, older than civilization, older than romance, older than the pride he wraps himself in. A man may speak casually about intimacy, but his unconscious never experiences it casually. The unconscious knows when a woman is giving herself from a place of truth rather than performance, from depth rather than obligation. And that difference reaches him like a storm he cannot prepare for. When a woman surrenders her body, something inside him recognizes her in a way he cannot articulate. It is not recognition of her face, her voice, or her form, but recognition of her essence, the part of her that vibrates beneath the surface, the part she hides even from herself. Jung called this the meeting of archetypes, the moment the inner masculine encounters the living symbol of the feminine. To the masculine psyche, her openness feels like being granted entrance into the temple of her unconscious. And whether he is ready or not, it forces him to confront the truth of what he carries within. Inside every man, there is a hidden spectrum. The warrior who wants to protect, the boy who wants to be held, the king who wants to be respected, the wanderer who fears being known, and the shadow that doubts he is worthy of anything sacred. When she lets him inside her, all these parts rise at once. It overwhelms him. It disorients him. It exposes him to emotions he has spent years, sometimes decades, suppressing under stoicism, ambition, distraction, or pride. Many women don't realize how deeply they are felt. They think men detach easily, move on quickly, or treat intimacy as an appetite. But this is often the surface reaction, not the unconscious response. The unconscious reaction is always deeper, more vulnerable, more revealing. A man may act unaffected, but inside him something shifts. Her presence lingers in the architecture of his psyche, stored not as memory, but as imprint. The feminine leaves marks in places the masculine spends his entire life trying not to feel. This is why some men become protective after intimacy. Not possessive, but protective. Her surrender awakens his instinct to safeguard what touched him in ways he cannot express. Yet for others, it awakens fear. Fear of dependency. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of being seen in the one place he cannot hide. And if he has been hurt, betrayed, or abandoned before, her openness can trigger all the wounds he thought he had mastered. Some withdraw, some grow distant. Some become confused by the intensity of what stirs inside them. They think it is her fault or their own weakness, when in reality, they are simply confronting a level of emotional truth they were never taught to navigate. For a man raised in environments where emotional expression was mocked or punished, intimacy becomes the moment his internal conflict is exposed. He wants to lean into the softness she offers, but the echoes of old conditioning warn him that closeness is dangerous. He wants to merge with her presence, but the ghosts of past pain whisper that attachment leads to loss. And so he stands at a psychological crossroads between the man he wants to be and the man he has been taught to become. This is why your intuition senses the shift in him, because the feminine is attuned to emotional undercurrents. You feel the subtle tremble in his energy. You sense the unspoken battle he hides behind steady breathing and quiet eyes. You recognize the tension between his desire to stay and his impulse to retreat. And while your mind may interpret his distance as rejection, the deeper truth is often the opposite. He distances because he feels more than he knows how to hold. Masculine energy is structured. Feminine energy is fluid. When she surrenders her body, she pours the ocean of her emotional and spiritual essence into the structure of his psyche. And structure, when filled too quickly, shakes. He is shaken not because she overwhelms him, but because she awakens him. Because in those moments of raw connection, he no longer feels separate or protected. His ego dissolves. His boundaries blur. His soul stands naked in front of her, exposed to the possibility that she might see the parts he cannot accept about himself. And there is nothing more terrifying to the masculine psyche than being seen in the places where he doubts his own worth. But here lies the paradox. It is also the most liberating experience he can have. Because the feminine does not merely reveal his wounds, she reveals his capacity for depth, tenderness, integrity, and devotion. In her openness, he glimpses the man he could become if he allowed himself to evolve, to feel, to rise beyond the rigid shell the world forced him into. This is why the right feminine presence does not weaken a man. It awakens him. It initiates him. It holds a mirror to the parts of him that were meant to lead with strength, not fear, with presence, not performance, with soul, not ego. And whether he admits it or not, he feels it deeply. A woman who surrenders her body doesn't just invite a man into her physical world. She enters his psychological underworld, where the myths he carries about himself come alive. This is where the masculine psyche reveals its deepest contradictions. Strength wrapped around insecurity, desire fused with fear, longing intertwined with resistance. To enter a woman is to confront the paradox of wanting to be powerful while also wanting to be forgiven for the moments he couldn't be. And this confrontation is not intellectual. It is somatic. It is felt in the tightening of his throat, in the heaviness of his breath, in the warmth that rises beneath his sternum where the anima tries to surface. Her surrender pulls him into a dimension he does not know how to navigate without risking the collapse of his persona. The persona, the mask he shows the world, the facade of control, is built on the illusion of being unaffected. But the moment she opens, that illusion fractures. Her body becomes the threshold where his truth is forced into the light. And truth, for the masculine psyche, is both a seduction and a threat. It seduces him toward closeness, yet threatens the identity he built around independence and detachment. If you look closely, you will notice how his energy shifts after intimacy, not in dramatic gestures, but in micro-expressions. A softening of his shoulders, a stillness in his gaze, a quietness that reveals he has descended into himself. Because her surrender is not passive. It is catalytic. It awakens his inner feminine. The part of him Jung believed was essential to wholeness. When she opens, she calls forth the anima he suppressed during childhood. The part of him that learned vulnerability was unsafe. Weakness was shameful, and emotional openness was a liability. But in the moment her body receives him, the anima rises and asks him to feel again. And feeling, real feeling, terrifies a man whose life has taught him to numb. That is why some men become restless after intimacy. They do not know how to integrate the emotional flood they experience. The feminine acts like a mirror, reflecting back the parts of him he abandoned in the name of survival. He feels exposed not because of her, but because of everything she awakens. She becomes the reminder of the tenderness he forgot, the compassion he repressed, the desire for closeness he buried under stoic discipline. A man's greatest inner conflict often emerges after a woman has opened to him, because her openness reveals both his potential and his wounds. The more unconscious his wounds, the more violently they react to closeness. A man who carries shame around his masculinity may withdraw to protect the ego. A man who fears inadequacy may chase validation from her without knowing why. A man who associates intimacy with loss may sabotage the connection the moment it feels too real. None of these responses are about her worth. They are about his unhealed stories, the scripts written by early attachments, emotional deprivation, past, heartbreak, and the silent expectations placed on him to be invulnerable. But beneath the noise of these defenses lies a humbler truth. Her surrender humbles him. It makes him want to rise into a version of himself he doesn't yet know how to embody. Her body tells his unconscious, "I trust you to enter not just me, but yourself." And this is the responsibility he feels. A sacred weight, a call to presence, a summon to integrity. This is why even the strongest men soften during authentic intimacy, not in weakness, but in recognition. The feminine essence reminds him of what he has been missing: connection, meaning, emotional resonance, the relief of not having to be a fortress. Her openness becomes a refuge where his soul can drop its armor long enough to remember it is human. Yet this softness awakens fear because softness is where wounds breathe. And to feel deeply means risking the pain of past failures, past betrayals, past moments where he loved and lost everything. You may sense this conflict in the silence after the heat, the way he looks at you as if seeing something ancient, the way his touch becomes slower, less driven by desire and more by presence, the way his breath aligns with yours, unconsciously synchronizing to the rhythm of your heartbeat. These are not small signs. These are the whispers of the unconscious, the masculine soul reaching toward the feminine not for conquest, but for communion. Because the truth is simple. A man does not surrender to a woman's body. He surrenders to the meaning behind her surrender. He surrenders to the implication of trust, to the weight of being chosen, to the realization that beneath all the masks, he is still a creature longing to be good enough for something holy. And the feminine body, offered in truth, is holy to the masculine psyche. Not because of purity or idealization, but because of vulnerability, because she is giving him access to the most unguarded part of her existence, her physical temple, her emotional rhythm, her spiritual depth. And he feels that. Whether he admits it or not, he feels it in the marrow. Some men run from this, others rise, but none remain unchanged. When a woman surrenders her body with intention rather than insecurity, something profound ripples through the masculine psyche. It is not simply arousal, it is recognition, initiation, and confrontation. Her openness becomes a psychological event inside him, pulling the deepest layers of his unconscious into movement. Suddenly, he is no longer interacting with her body alone. He is encountering the symbolic feminine, the archetype that has haunted him, guided him, and shaped him since childhood. And this encounter awakens a conflict at the core of his masculinity, the desire to merge with her and the fear of being transformed by her. To understand this, one must look beyond the surface of his reactions. The masculine soul is structured around direction, purpose, and coherence. His ego depends on control, internal control, emotional control, narrative control. But feminine surrender dissolves control. It draws him out of linearity and into depth, forcing him to feel rather than analyze. Her body doesn't simply receive him, it surrounds him with the truth he tries to outrun. He enters her physically, but she enters him symbolically. She slips into the architecture of his psyche and touches the places where he is still unmade. This is why the masculine often experiences a strange mix of tenderness and panic afterward. Her surrender softens his defenses, but those defenses have been the scaffolding of his identity. If he lets them fall, who is he? A warrior taught not to need softness suddenly confronted with it. A stoic trained not to show emotion suddenly drowning in it. A man who learned to equate vulnerability with danger suddenly feeling safest in the arms of a woman who can break him without lifting a finger. It's disorienting, and within that disorientation lies the psychological truth Jung pointed toward. Intimacy is where the anima resurfaces. Not the fantasy of femininity he projected onto her, but the real feminine within him, the one he suppressed in order to survive a world that mocked sensitivity and rewarded aloofness. When she surrenders her body, she awakens his inner feminine like a ghost returning for its rightful place. He feels her rising inside him, the part that longs for connection, the part that aches to be understood, the part that wants to rest. And yet, this is also the part he has exiled out of fear. So he stands at the border between who he pretends to be and who he truly is. Some men freeze because they sense that this moment, this touch, this breath, this merging, has the power to change the storyline of their lives. Others become gentle without knowing why, as if responding to an ancient memory of how the masculine is meant to meet the feminine, not with conquest, but with reverence. Others become distant, not out of coldness, but because they fear losing themselves in the very connection they crave. And you, as the feminine, feel this shift instinctively. You feel when his heart becomes too loud for him to manage. You sense the tremor of a man who is fighting the urge to open deeper, terrified of needing you too much. You sense the walls he rebuilt seconds after they fell. You sense the yearning behind his silence, the fear behind his breath, the gratitude behind his touch. This is why the feminine often confuses his withdrawal with rejection. But withdrawal, for the masculine, is often self-protection. He retreats not because he feels too little, but because he feels too much. Her surrender pulls him into emotional waters he was never taught to swim. The vulnerability she evokes threatens his sense of autonomy, challenges his identity, and exposes his hidden wounds. And yet, it also awakens a longing he cannot extinguish, the longing to be witnessed without judgment. This is the paradox of masculine intimacy. The place he fears most is the place he desires most. The place where he feels the weakest is the place where he becomes the most real. And the woman who can open without collapsing into neediness becomes the lighthouse guiding him through this internal war. When a woman surrenders her body with both softness and sovereignty, the masculine psyche experiences something almost mythic. He sees the possibility of union, not the fusion that erases him, but the connection that expands him. He feels the truth that intimacy is not a threat to his freedom, but a doorway to a higher version of himself. And this realization terrifies him because it means he can no longer hide behind the facade of invulnerability. But it also awakens the noblest part of him, the part that wants to protect rather than possess, the part that wants to honor rather than control, the part that wants to rise rather than retreat, the part that recognizes her not as an object of desire, but as an initiator of evolution. And in that recognition, something shifts inside him, quietly, invisibly, but irrevocably. He begins to see himself differently. He begins to feel the weight of responsibility not as a burden, but as a calling. And if he is even slightly conscious, he will sense that her surrender was not a gift to his ego, but a summons to his soul. There is a moment, so subtle most men never speak of it, when her surrender passes through his body and reaches the core of his psyche. It is the moment where pleasure becomes revelation, where desire becomes remembrance, where the masculine soul realizes he is not simply touching her, he is being touched by everything she represents. Her openness becomes a doorway into the parts of himself he has never fully understood, his longing for meaning, his hunger for significance, his need to be both strong and understood, powerful and softened, grounded and undone. Her body becomes the language through which the unconscious speaks to him, and the unconscious does not whisper, it trembles. It shakes loose the illusions he clings to and exposes the deeper truth his ego avoids, that the masculine is not completed through dominance, but through surrender of his own defenses. Not surrender to her control, but surrender to the depth she awakens. In her presence, he confronts the truth that the armor he has worn for years was never built to protect him from danger. It was built to protect him from intimacy. And now, in the warmth of her breath, in the softness of her exhale, in the quiet after the merging, he realizes how tired he is of holding himself together. There is a certain grief he feels in that moment, the grief of recognizing how long he has lived without authentic closeness. Most women underestimate the power of this impact. They imagine he is the one in control, the one leading, the one deciding where the moment goes. But psychologically, the feminine is the environment in which the masculine becomes conscious of himself. Her openness is a mirror he cannot escape. It reflects his deepest desires and deepest inadequacies simultaneously, and this duality overwhelms him. He sees, in her surrender, the possibility of becoming the man he always wanted to be. Present, grounded, capable of holding both her and himself. But he also sees the man he has been, the boy who wasn't nurtured, the teenager who was humiliated, the adult who learned to bury vulnerability under sarcasm or silence. Her body becomes the bridge between these two versions of himself, and crossing that bridge requires a courage he never learned. Some men rise to this call, others collapse under it, yet all feel it. This is why a man may look at you differently after intimacy, why his eyes soften as if seeing you through a new lens, why his touch becomes slower, as though memorizing something sacred, why he grows quiet, not because he is disconnected, but because he is integrating the shock of his own emotional activation. Her feminine openness calls forth not just his desire, but his integrity, his shadow, his longing, and his fear. Jung believed that intimacy awakens the psychological forces that shape identity, and nothing awakens these forces more powerfully than a woman who opens without losing herself. A woman who surrenders her body not out of need, but out of presence, not out of fear of losing him, but out of the fullness of her own essence. To the masculine psyche, this is alchemy. Her sovereignty prevents him from feeling trapped. Her softness prevents him from feeling inadequate. Her openness prevents him from feeling unwanted. Her depth prevents him from feeling empty. And yet, this same alchemy exposes him to his shadow. He feels the weight of his own fragility rise through him. He feels the tension between wanting to stay and wanting to run. He feels the dissonance between what he desires emotionally and what he fears psychologically. Because when a woman surrenders her body, she is not asking him to dominate. She is asking him to be present. She is asking him to be conscious. She is asking him to show up in the one place where he cannot perform, the place where his soul touches hers. Presence is terrifying for a man who learned to equate love with loss. Consciousness is confronting for a man who built his identity on detachment. Showing up is difficult for a man who has never shown how to hold emotional weight without collapsing under it. And yet, despite the fear, something in him longs to rise, something ancient, something buried, something noble. Her surrender wakes his inner king, the archetype that remembers what honor feels like. Not the ego-driven king who rules, but the soul-driven king who serves. The one who protects without controlling, desires without taking, loves without losing himself. This awakening is why he treats her differently afterward, even if he doesn't say a word. It's why her memory lingers in him like a song stuck in the body. It's why he becomes more attentive, more present, or more conflicted depending on which side of himself he is ready to meet. Because the feminine does not simply touch the masculine, she transforms him. And transformation always comes with a cost, the death of who he was pretending to be. If he is conscious, he embraces this death. If he is afraid, he resists it. If he is wounded, he retreats from it. But none remain untouched. There comes a point in this psychological unfolding where the masculine psyche can no longer hide behind instinct, ego, or performance. Her surrender becomes too real, too revealing, too intimate to ignore. It forces a reckoning, soft, unavoidable, and transformative. In that sacred aftermath where the world falls silent, he feels something he was never taught to name, the weight of being witnessed without expectation. And this is where the deepest shift occurs. Her openness, offered without desperation, becomes the final mirror. It shows him the difference between attachment and presence, between craving her body and longing for her essence. It reveals that the connection he feels has nothing to do with possession and everything to do with recognition. He sees in her surrender not a woman who needs him, but a woman who chooses him. And nothing humbles a man more than being chosen by someone who does not fear losing him. Jung taught that the masculine becomes whole through confrontation with the feminine, not the outer woman alone, but the inner feminine he has rejected. When she opens, she awakens both. She calls his anima out of hiding and places it into his hands. It is here he realizes that he cannot keep living through instinct alone. He must live through consciousness, and consciousness demands accountability. A man who is awake feels responsible for the space he enters. He feels the weight of her trust as a sacred invitation. He feels the call to rise not in dominance, but in presence, not in ego, but in awareness, not in performance, but in truth. Her surrender becomes the moment he asks himself, "Am I prepared to meet her with more than desire? Am I ready to bring my soul where my body has gone?" If he is ready, he softens, not into weakness, but into clarity. He becomes more attuned, more grounded, more honest. He stops running from intimacy because he no longer fears the reflection she offers. He sees himself in her eyes and recognizes a man capable of depth. He realizes that vulnerability is not a threat, but a gateway. And for the first time, he feels the possibility of connection without losing himself. But if he is not ready, he retreats, not from her, but from himself. He withdraws into the shadows he refuses to face. He blames circumstances, timing, confusion, anything to avoid admitting the truth. Her surrender awakened a tenderness he does not yet know how to hold. He is not rejecting her. He is rejecting the version of himself he is afraid to become. Only men willing to confront their inner fractures can stay present in the face of that kind of intimacy. And this is where a woman must remember her power. Her worth does not rise or fall depending on whether he can meet her depth. She is not responsible for healing him, fixing him, or waiting for him to catch up to the truth she already carries. Her body is not a test, not a lure, not an offering to be measured by his reaction. Her surrender was not weakness, it was sovereignty. It was the expression of a woman rooted in her own emotional truth. The feminine who knows herself does not collapse into longing. She does not shrink when he hesitates. She does not bargain with her own value. Her softness is not a strategy. It is a state. It is the natural expression of someone who no longer fears being seen. And a woman who no longer fears being seen cannot be diminished by someone else's inability to see clearly. She learns that the masculine psyche's reaction, whether he rises or retreats, has nothing to do with her worth and everything to do with his readiness. Her surrender was a mirror, and he confronted only himself. When she realizes this, she steps into emotional freedom. She stops carrying the weight of his wounds on her shoulders. She welcomes connection, but she no longer depends on it. She receives intimacy, but she no longer clings to it. She holds space, but she no longer abandons herself in it. And in this freedom, something extraordinary happens. She becomes the kind of woman who is not chosen out of desire alone, but out of reverence, because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.